Good morning and welcome to the beautiful Forest Knoll residence in the hills of Los Angeles, California. We are here perched on the top of a hill in West Hollywood, looking over the entire city with a beautiful infinity pool, this incredible architectural marvel behind me, and we are going to photograph it from start to finish. Now we have some incredible lessons planned for you today. Everything from scouting a home like this, photographing a home like this, and putting it all together in post-production. Luckily for you, the house is on the market and can be purchased for the low price of just $32 million. Please send all inquiries this way. Now, as beautiful as this house is, this may be the worst time in history to be making photographs in Los Angeles. There are wildfires raging up and down the state of California. So we have this lovely acrid smoke settled over the city. Everything looks a little bit apocalyptic, but we're gonna try to make the best pictures we can. Now, I can't say I've ever dealt with this problem before, but it does happen very often that I am flown out to a location and it's raining and the weather's not great, it's cloudy, and I've gotta come up with amazing photographs. And today, we're gonna try to rise to that challenge. So I'm pretty confident that I can still get all of the required interior shots. The view shots might be a little bit difficult. It might clear up, it might not. It's a bit hazy out there. We'll see what happens. In a perfect world, we would have clear blue skies, or the client might let us come back later. Unfortunately, we only have one day to shoot here, so we're gonna do the absolute best that we can. So before we actually get to photographing this house or any big house like this, we're gonna have to scout. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk through the entire house and I'm gonna look in every room. I'm gonna try to find the shots that are the obvious money shots with beautiful, perfect compositions that are ready for the taking. And I'm gonna try to predict what might become an amazing photo, whether the sun is going to come around from a certain angle and add some beautiful rays of light, or maybe at twilight could look particularly impressive. Okay, so here we are in the entryway of this house and we're gonna start scouting. Believe it or not, I used to scout with a camera. I only really scout with an iPhone now. And the reason for that is I can keep such a quick, handy record of the scouting photographs at hand at all times. And there are a number of apps built into the iPhone that help with scouting. These apps include obviously making lists to keep track of your shot list. I can set as many alarms as I want to remind myself of when a certain shot is going to be best. If I predict that the sun is going to be in a certain spot at a certain time, I'll set an alarm and make sure that I don't forget about that image and I come back and get it when it's the absolute best time of day. All right, so let's take a look at this house. Okay, so as you walk in, you get an incredible look into this first massive volume, and this is going to be an incredible photograph, right? It almost hits you over the head with how obvious it is. However, I don't really think it's going to be at this time of day. It's really hazy out there. There's not too much of a view, but I'm thinking at twilight, if we get a bit of a colorful sunset, maybe we get some pink and orange in that sky with all the city lights below, it could be absolutely incredible. So as amazing as this is, I'm not gonna be worried about taking it right now. I'm gonna put it on our list for twilight. All right, so we have walked through the house to the end near the windows, and if you turn around, there's an incredible shot this way as well. Now, one thing I did notice as I walked over here, there's these really cool patterns of sunlight being formed as the sun sort of beams down through the mullions. And like I said, I'm just gonna use an iPhone and I'm gonna see if I can find anything that looks remotely interesting. I'm looking at patterns and shapes on the wood, more of sort of a detail shot than anything else. And I'll come over here and remind myself that I'm probably gonna wanna take this shot, but I don't think this is the right time of day either, because the light is all coming from behind me and it's so flat. It's as if I turned this window behind me into a giant on-camera party flash, right? Think of it that way. It is removing all of the depth and texture from the scene. I'm really looking for great side-lit and backlit scenes rather than getting myself into a situation where I'm recreating a $32 million party flash. So let's walk over into the kitchen. And again, I'm kind of turning around as I walk. Ooh, that's a kind of cool shot. If you come in here, you do see this light sort of beaming in this way. You have this wonderful sort of very graphic nested image here that gives you the entire material palette of the home in one image. You've got the beautiful board-formed concrete fireplace, you've got the wood paneling that goes all the way through the ceiling, and you've got, of course, the beautiful minimal plaster work that runs throughout the entire house. Now, what I like about this is it's almost like a piece of great graphic design, or even like a Mondrian painting, right? You've got these nested shapes, you've got the painting down here, which kind of mirrors the fireplace in tonality and texture. You've got the doors, which are going to give you depth. And again, it's kind of like rectangle, square, rectangle. All these really cool shapes are lining up perfectly for what I think would be an amazing detail shot. So this is definitely something I want to grab. So I want to take a few test shots and add it to our list. So here we are in the kitchen, and it's a pretty cool kitchen, but I don't think the shot is very spectacular right now. But I have a feeling that more towards sunset, The sun's going to come over the house this way. We're going to get some amazing golden light sort of raking throughout the entire scene. Now I'm going to use an app called Sun Surveyor, and that is going to tell me exactly where the sun is going to be at any time of day. All right, so here is the app, and as I pan, it will show you the track of the sun and where it is at any time. Okay, so I see these windows, and I'm going to use my app, and I'm going to attempt to predict when and where the sun is going to come in. So on my phone here, I can see around 5 p.m. the sun should be right out there through the windows, and I'm guessing, provided the gender reveal smoke party problem doesn't mess us up too bad, we're going to get amazing golden sunlight that's going to come in, and it should reach, and if I use the app I can follow it, the sun should come all the way through and give us an incredible photograph. Right now I think the light in here is kind of boring and somewhat flat, but I think if we wait until we have actual golden sunlight coming in here, it's going to set this place off and make it look amazing. This is going to light up, it's going to bring out the color and texture in the wood and the floor, and it's going to give us something interesting to look at and show us that this house gets great light throughout the entire day. Now, a house like this has been designed to catch as much beautiful natural light as it possibly can. So rather than shoot this when the sun is directly overhead and things are totally flat, I'm going to do my best to show how the house has been designed to capture the most light possible. It is California, and we are known for these golden sunsets, and clearly these windows are designed to catch that. It looks like there's a little bit of a topiary back there, which is going to break up that sunlight and create this nice, beautiful mottled light. Right now, we don't really have beautiful light in here. It's kind of flat. It doesn't really show off the texture or the color inherent in these beautiful materials. So by waiting a little bit and adding a little bit of mood with that later day golden sunlight, I think the photo is going to be much better. In the past, I may have been tested to try to fit a square peg in a round hole and shoot this at the wrong time of day by adding tons of flash and bringing it up. But I found that life gets a little bit easier and the photos get a little better when you make a plan to photograph things at the best possible time of day. And I am going to think that the best time of day for this room is not noon when the sun is straight overhead and the light is flat, but later in the day towards sunset in that golden light when it's raking through the scene, showing off that beautiful, interesting golden sunlight. Now, it's going to be impossible to get that beautiful golden sunlight streaming in through every photograph. We just can't be in all the places at all the time. But I'm going to try to use the sun to improve the rooms that might need it most, or take those money shots and kick them up one extra level to make them really incredible. Now, sometimes I have the luxury of revisiting homes multiple times or shooting over the course of 2 days, and we can wait and get the best sunlight. But sometimes you're on a travel job, you only have 1 day to shoot, the homeowner might not want you there for multiple days, the office might not want you there for multiple days, and you have to make something happen with what you have. In that case, I would not at all be opposed to putting up a flash outside or faking some sunlight, provided it was somewhat realistic in the way it represented the light as it moved naturally through the space. So as I showed you with the app and me crouching down over here, I think the best light is going to be around 5 p.m. So I'm going to set an alarm on my phone and I'm going to label it kitchen shot. Now, I don't think this is a shot that needs to be done exactly at the minute of 5 p.m. I think the light's probably going to take a few hours to develop through here. So we'll be sure to come back and check on it throughout the day. So the first shot is a pretty obvious one. I do think there's going to be an incredible photo, again, as that light streams in later of the day, of this entire kitchen. There's probably going to be a one-point perspective from somewhere in here, looking over the table into the kitchen. You get that entire backsplash, you get the range, you get this hood, and all of the gorgeous finishes behind. All right, so I'm doing a quick test shot here from the corner to give me an idea of the shot that I need to come back to get. And I really like this, even though it's an iPhone shot. It shows me everything important about the room. It shows me the beautiful waterfall island, the amazing cabinetry, and everything all the way out to that view that hopefully clears up this afternoon. And as we walk around, you can see these amazing sort of flashes of light developing almost everywhere. I don't think that they're ready yet. I think this is going to be one of those 1-2 p.m. things. But once this comes down and starts to run on the floor, I think we're going to get some beautiful detail shots. So I'll do a couple test shots on my iPhone to remind us, and I'm going to set an alarm to come check on these at about 1 p.m. Okay, so we are up here on this balcony overlooking the pool and the city view beyond, and obviously this is a very important shot that we've got to get. But just like the shot down below, I don't really think it's ready to come out of the oven. I don't think this is the time of day to make that happen. Again, the haze is kind of ugly and crappy out there. You can't really see what's going on. I'm thinking that during twilight, when the city lights back there start to light up, this could be really, really incredible. But as it does get darker and the lights begin to get brighter, I think that will actually cut through the haze and kind of make it look a little better than it is in reality. I think the best shot here is going to be right in the middle. It's kind of obvious, and I'm not one for taking the most obvious first shot, but you can't come into this house and not photograph this incredible view. Everything here is just teed up, ready for us to blast it 200 yards down the fairway. All right, let's go take a quick look at the master. Okay, so welcome to the incredible master bedroom. Behind you, there are some amazing views over the entire city, somewhat choked by the smoke, but we'll see what happens. I think this is going to be a great shot later in the day. One reason for that is I prefer not to shoot bedrooms at like high noon. I think it kind of creates this disconnect when you shoot a beautiful bedroom at the wrong time of day. In my photography, I try to show the space at the time it would really be used. Would you be in your bedroom in the middle of the day? I mean, like maybe if you took a nap, but I want to make the viewer believe that they can see themselves in the space. So when I shoot a bedroom, I'm going to try to push it closer to twilight, sunrise, sunset, or when the sun is just coming up over the horizon, casting that beautiful golden glow over the entire landscape. So right now there's some actually kind of interesting light coming in, but again, I don't really think this is the best time of day to photograph it. I'd rather it be more towards night or really early in the morning. Since we've already missed the early morning window to do it, I'm gonna elect to do it later in the day. I think the sun is interesting, but not enough to stop what we're doing and jump in and get the shot, because I do have a feeling that we're gonna get some amazing light that sort of gives this amazing textural glow to the entire city below later in the day. So as you can see right here, you have this light coming in. It's not really enough to make a really big impact on the photo. It's kind of neat, but like I said, I don't think it's worth stopping what we're doing to get this shot. Now, when it comes to selecting an angle to make this photograph, we really have two options. We have to shoot this way. There is this incredible window with a gorgeous view of the entire city below. I can either go here in this little reading nook, and I'm thinking I would like to get as far back as possible to reduce distortion from a wide angle lens, and so that I can show this really cool built-in wet bar. There's a plumbed-in coffee maker and a little drinks cabinet, and how fun would that be to have in your bedroom? The other option is to come over to the right-hand side. And this is a pretty impressive shot in its own right, but there's two reasons I don't like this. Number one, I can't really get any further this way. On that side, I could get a lot further to the left, which would put me further away from the subject, thereby reducing distortion. I know I'm gonna be shooting this pretty wide, and if I'm forced into kind of a tight area, we're gonna get this funky wide angle distortion at the top of the frame. So on the left, I can get a little further away. The second reason I'm not gonna shoot from over here is I know the sun is gonna set over here. It's gonna be behind me. And again, I want that landscape to have that beautiful golden textural light. If the sun is setting over here, that means it's gonna be flat light on that entire landscape. Lastly, when I'm shooting from the left-hand side of the room, there's actually a really cool hill that kind of cascades down from right to left and adds a little bit of depth and texture to the landscape outside. Here, it's pretty flat and there's not that impressive of a view. There's no water, there's no hill, there's not a lot of color out there. Now you may be wondering why I'm not delivering multiple shots of some of these amazing spaces, and I actually will, but because we're filming, it really slows us down. I'll be sure to show you all the shots I come up with and walk you through them at the end of the lesson. Now, this is the master closet, and it is amazing, but the photo in here is pretty straightforward. We don't have to time it with the sun or do anything crazy. I'll talk about it later, and it will get delivered, but like I said, we don't have time to cover every little room since we're only filming here for one day. We're here in the master bathroom, and there's one angle that jumps out at me immediately. If I stand somewhere in this area and look down this long hallway with these vanities on the right-hand side, you've got this amazing skylight and this amazing bathtub at the end of the photograph. You have these really cool marble countertops that run all the way down the wall and to the left, and you can see the sunlight starting to come in, and that gives us an idea that there's a window out there. If I stand on the opposite end of the hallway and look this way, I just get this blank white wall, and the photograph is not nearly as interesting. I don't think that the time of day is going to be super important. I'm kind of looking at where the sun is. I don't think it's going to come down. So I'm going to take a couple iPhone test shots to remind us to get something here. And I'm going to make a note to come back maybe at 3 p.m. when the light is a little bit boring otherwise. Now here is the master shower, and this is a gorgeous space. And this is a great example of a place that will get golden light, but I don't think is worth sacrificing other better photographs for. around the same time that the kitchen will be incredible, this might get some of that same light. But I'm not going to shoot up here at that time of day because I think there are other more important shots, such as the kitchen, that we can get when that beautiful golden light is streaming. So along this hallway, there are a number of secondary and tertiary bedrooms. I don't necessarily need to get a shot of these with an iPhone. They're pretty obvious shots. We're going to put the camera in the corner. Maybe if some amazing lighting conditions develops while we're there, we'll do a little detail of it. But they're not anything that I spend too much time worrying about. What I really want to stay focused on is making sure I get a good idea of when the best light is going to be in the best spaces, set an alarm so I don't forget, and make sure I have an idea of the composition before I get there. This is really awesome. So as I walk through here, I've caught this beautiful moment, and what you have is this little nook, this little balcony overlooking the living room, and these two chairs that look over this incredible view. And I'm going to grab a few iPhone shots, but just like our shot down the middle, I don't think this is a daytime shot. I think this is later in the day. The light is going to be very similar to the time of day that we're going to shoot the bedroom because they both have that incredible view, and that same situation is going to happen with the golden light breaking over the landscape. I'm going to pop in here and see if there's a cool shot looking back. At the beginning of the scout, I said I really try to get into every nook and cranny, and there is an incredible photograph all the way in this corner looking back this way down this railing. I can set us up for a beautiful one-point perspective, and the good thing here is that it doesn't really matter when I shoot it. There's a window down here, but there's not too much of a view. It's not going to be really affected by twilight, and this could be a great daytime option to make something interesting while we wait for better light to develop elsewhere. Okay, here is a really cool office, and it's reminiscent of the master bedroom. Something I've definitely got to get, so we're going to add it to the list, and because it's not as important to me as the master bedroom or some of these other view shots, I can probably do it later in the day, but I don't think it is time critical. I'll try to fit it in when I get that cool shot looking back down the center volume. So this corner actually has a really great view of the pool, which is something that we don't get in the master bedroom. Again, we do have that wonderful view. The only thing that is going to be tricky here is this is actually a very, very small room compared to some of the others in this house. All right, so let's go check out this exercise room and sitting area. Very cool little spot. Not as grandiose as some of the other spaces, but absolutely worth getting on our list. We got something in here too. So in here is the screening room, which is a very, very unique spot. A big thing in these Hollywood Hills homes, though, is to have a screening room. A lot of people who work in the industry or are film buffs will end up purchasing these homes. So here is our exercise room. Pretty simple space. Got this mirror behind me, and outside we have this incredible outdoor shower underneath these Sioux olive trees. And I love, again, this dappled sunlight coming down here. This is probably going to be a daytime shot, so I'll make sure we get this before the sun disappears behind the house. So from this angle, again, I see that incredible fireplace, and I want to show that there's some continuity between this room and the living room. There's also a pretty great view out here, and I think we'll be able to put together a nice shot in here. Time of day, again, if I had a preference, I'd do it later in the day because the light's going to be better. But again, I don't really want to sacrifice a secondary photo like this for a money shot where I'm going to really need to use that great light. So here we are outside, and this is obviously an angle we've got to capture. The only problem is the backyard is pretty small, pretty tight. So I'm worried that I'm going to be able to get a great shot without missing half the house or distorting it to Kingdom Come. That's because I'm going to be so close and so wide. I think the best option here is going to be something out along the back edge of the pool. The only problem is there's got to be like 100+ foot drop down, and I don't want to cheat death. I've already had one backstory do this year, don't need another. So I'm thinking for the money shot, I want to be centered and get those 3 volumes sort of beautifully composed. A very, very centered shot, a nice one-point perspective. Now, the only way to really scout that and get an idea for it is to get out there in the pool. I'm not quite ready to do that, as you can see, but I am predicting that it's going to be pretty amazing, and with a wide enough lens and being far enough away, it shouldn't be too comically distorted. Another bonus to having the pool in front of the camera is that I'm hoping that the very still water will reflect the house almost in a mirror image. I'm not guaranteeing it, but I'm thinking we can get a pretty cool effect if I get the camera in just the right spot. I'm thinking that's definitely going to be a twilight money shot. with all these doors wide open and the lights inside, it should look absolutely incredible. And the good news about that is we don't really need to contend with the haze and the smoke because there's no view. So that could be a great time of day to get a twilight, considering we're looking at the house, not a view. We should be able to cheat and not worry about the smoke at all. Because there are multiple twilight shots happening at the same time, I'm probably gonna have to set up one camera inside and give my assistant the iPad so that she can keep shooting while I get the shot set up outside. Because I'm gonna be in the pool, I'm not gonna be able to run back and forth. Everything has to be ready to go and perfectly composed before twilight. So I think it's time to start shooting. I'm gonna begin inside because I don't think anything else outside is really worth it right now with this kind of dull flat light and the smoky haze. Scouted the entire house. I've got my alarm set. I've got my list ready. I've got a few pictures in my phone for ideas. Let's get shooting. Welcome to Grandpa's Corner. Today, we are going to begin our shoot here at Forest Knoll from this shot that we scouted earlier. And I love this picture because it's a great overview of the entire main interior space of the house, and we can do it at almost any time of day. I'm gonna do it now because we don't have a view to capture. We don't really need to get it at twilight. There are better, more important shots that we can get at better times of day, but this will still be very interesting as it is. Now, my goal here is to show not only the upstairs, but also this downstairs area too. And I've got my tripod here, but I haven't locked in the camera yet because I'm not exactly sure where I want to put the camera and how my final composition is going to be. So I'm going to take some handheld shots. I have my iPad here to compare. I'm going to take a few handheld shots here with my camera, and I'm going to see what I think the best composition is before I get the tripod set up, because I'm going to be up against this glass. It's going to be really hard to maneuver, and I want to be sure of what is the best shot before I dial everything in and get it locked on the tripod. So let's get to work and start taking some test shots. Okay, so I'm beginning to frame up my shot. And like I said, I'm hand holding a camera here, trying to find the composition before I get too committed. Now, I loved the view you get from sitting up here, but actually sitting in the chair and having the camera down here isn't the best photograph for a number of reasons. If I come a little bit back and I maybe line up myself down the center of the hallway, it improves, but I still have this railing blocking the view down here. You've got all these reflections on the left that pick up the chairs and the wood and everything else. It just adds visual confusion. And I also think it's more important that we get this space instead of this space. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to actually think if I can come and get the camera somehow directly over this pane of glass and split the composition in two, I'm thinking that's going to be the best shot. Now, this is at 24 millimeters, but I feel like I'm right on the edge of being not wide enough and being just perfect. So I'm gonna put the 17 millimeter lens on, and I'm not too worried about it because I know I'm going to crop. I'm probably gonna get a little bit of distortion over here on the right-hand side, but since everything is so far away down below, I don't think there'll be too much distortion down there. So for that reason, I'm gonna take off the 24 and try a shot with a 17. And while that is pretty wide at first, I do think if I punch in a little bit, I'll have exactly what I want. So let's go ahead and finagle the tripod into the right spot. It's going to be a little tricky to get it here, but I'm pretty sure I can figure it out. Okay, so I've got my camera here set up, and it's a little bit precarious, but it doesn't feel like it's going to go anywhere. I've slid this a little bit offset in the bracket to get it lined up right over the glass, and it's time to get our shot. So I'm going to take a test shot here. And as you can see, this is looking pretty good. It's not perfect, but I will dial that in 1 second, but there's a few things I want to address. First, we have all these interior lights on, and because it's the middle of the day, I don't really think it makes sense to photograph a home with all of the lights on. So I'm gonna have my assistant turn off all of the interior lights. And second, I've noticed that there's this beautiful lighting condition developing in the hallway. There's light streaming down the skylight, and in a few minutes, it will be exactly where it needs to be so that it is aligned with all of the vertical lines in the house. That's gonna add one more nice little touch of a graphic element that will make this a more impactful, interesting photo. If that light was kind of slashing off in a random direction, it might not help, but because it's coming straight down and we have those beautiful straight shadows, I think it'll add a little zing to this photo. The next thing I noticed is that this chair is really close to the camera, and because I'm so wide and so close, it's getting a bit distorted. I don't think there's going to be a good way to solve that problem, so what I'm going to do is just pull that chair out entirely. I don't think it's a necessary element in the photograph, and by being there, it's only going to serve to distract if it's distorted. So let's go ahead and pull that out. Now that everything is looking good, the lights are off, and the furniture is moved out of the way, I'm going to make sure I time this photograph perfectly so when that sun is aligned vertically down that hallway, I can bracket my shots. I'm going to bracket 5 shots here, 1 stop apart, and I'm going to try to capture this entirely with natural light. Even if I had a flash, I'm not quite sure where I would put it. There's nowhere really to hide it, and it's not like I can bounce it off of these 40-foot tall ceilings. We have really great light inside, everything is nice and brightly lit, and there's not any shadows that are too dark or any highlights that are too bright that they can't be captured just using bracketing. I am at an aperture of f11, ISO 200, and my middle exposure is 1/30th of a second. So I'm going to go ahead and bracket those shots right now. So this was a relatively simple photo that was mostly about the composition and the lighting. Once we found the right angle and a good time of day, it was just a matter of straightening things up and making sure that everything was good to go. So let's jump into the studio and do a little bit of post-production on this photo. Alright everyone, here we are in post-production for this shot, and this house, I'm going to start to introduce some of the more complicated techniques for working with natural light. Now, this house is going to be really tricky for me to edit because the smoke outside was really difficult and all those views have sort of been sabotaged by tons and tons of wildfire smoke. And there are some places in this house that are going to be really tricky in terms of post-production that we'll get into later. But for now, we're going to start out simple, or, you know, relatively simple. And what I'm doing here is really just the same techniques that you've seen before, applied in multiple different ways. So every shot I'm doing has, this is the best and worst thing about architectural photography, right? Every photo is different. There is never going to be some automated one-size-fits-all approach. And if there is, and you know about it, I've been doing this for 10 years, please email me and say, this program, I throw 5 pictures in and out comes a perfect, beautiful architectural photograph. I don't think it exists, but if it does, you would save me a lot of time, so please let me know. I am still taking a somewhat improvisational approach to every photograph. Every photograph has its own problem to solve. It's like playing chess. Every situation is going to be different, even from bedroom to bedroom to bedroom in the same house, or in the same master bedroom in multiple different houses, because of the direction of the room, where the windows are, what time of day you're shooting at. Every house is different, but the techniques that get us across the finish line are somewhat similar, just tweaked and applied differently. And so I know it can be a little bit overwhelming, and these are somewhat similar techniques, but in this house, we're going to start to take them in some new directions. So let's get started here. There's going to be no major surprises as far as Lightroom goes. I think our white balance here looks great. We had plenty of white space to work with. We had a lot of natural light. We weren't using the interior practical lights. There's a few problems. I think it's a little bit too warm in the whites, but if I adjust my white balance here in Lightroom, then the wood is not going to look that great. So I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm going to do some color tweaking in Lightroom. And this feels relatively flat overall. We have this really beautiful area out here, which looks blown out. I'd like to pull that back in and give the viewer some context of where they are in Los Angeles. But like I said, we did have some great light in this shot. It's just a little flat, needs a little caressing. So let's get started. I'm gonna go ahead and look at my brightest, and I see great things here, and darkest exposures. That might be a little bit too dark even, but we're gonna bring them all into Photoshop. But before I do, let's go ahead and adjust our highlights and shadows. Highlights can come down, shadows can come up. You can always add a little more contrast later. I'm going to select all of these and synchronize them. I feel like this looks great. This one feels a little too bright. This one feels a little too dark. The interior here just feels, meh, to me, right? It feels flat. The whites aren't very white. They're almost grayish. But this one feels overexposed. I'm going to bring this up a half a stop. Right? That feels really nice. It feels bright, but not like fake bright. This feels almost fake bright, like going into the house, and there's no difference between outside and inside. So I'll bring that up a half a stop, and I'll apply that to everything. And so we have everything bumped up a half a stop, just sort of to taste, so that I have a base exposure that feels like the house felt like. Again, too bright, a little too dark here. This feels just right. So, highlights, shadows, exposure. Let's go ahead and right-click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. All right, here we are. I'm going to go ahead and rename my layers, and very simply, and I'm going to get to work. Like I said, I'm going to use this layer, my fourth exposure, as the base, and I will label it as such. And all I'm going to be doing is looking for problem spots, going through and pulling things in piece by piece. So on its own, this is almost a decent photograph. We could get away with just adding a little bit of contrast and highlight, but if we really want to make it look as good as we possibly can, let's get to work. So what I see here, I see a lot of blown out highlights. I see we've lost a lot of detail out here. It's mostly the view out the window that's bothering me, and let's go ahead and get to work on this. The histogram looks very good. If I want to actually prove to you that these are blown out and there's no detail there, you can use the window and then go to properties here and click on info, and you can mouse over different areas in your image and you can actually see what is blown out and what is not. So for example, where you see 255, 255, 255, that means it's pure white, there's no data there, it's blown out. And anything generally within like 245 to 250, I would consider almost too bright. You can do this to taste, but that's just a quick way to tell. And if you want to see if something is too dark, it's totally, no detail left, blown out the other way, you're going to be looking for 0, 0, 0. And there's nowhere in here that is really totally black. So I think we've done a good job getting a nice base exposure, but a little bit of this feels a lot out of control. So let's just go through piece by piece and fix it. In this middle exposure, you can see we get a lot of detail back in this sort of skylight area. We get a lot of detail back outside. We start to see some color in the sky, but I don't want to take too much of it. I much prefer the way that this hanging lamp looks, sort of this really cool pendant light here in the brighter exposure. So I want to be careful not to use too much of it. So as I've shown you before, I'm going to go ahead and create a luminosity mask using the RGB channel. I'm going to command or control click on the channel thumbnail and click on this save selection as a channel button. I can then command D or control D to deselect the little marching ants, and I'll now be working with a mask that is based on the brightness or luminosity values in the image. So where it's black, it shows up black. Where it's white, it shows up white. The idea here is to adjust this alpha 1 channel. To adjust this alpha 1 channel, I'm going to use Command M to add a curves adjustment here. Adjust the alpha channel so that we are turning it into a mask where we reveal the darkest parts of the image below it. So there's that darker exposure. I'm going to use this mask to only show certain parts of that darker exposure, which is stacked on top of the base exposure in our layers palette. So this looks pretty good. All of the brights are white, which means they'll be revealed. So when I apply this to that layer, the brightest parts of that darker exposure are what's going to be revealed. And because the overall exposure is darker, the bright parts aren't as overexposed and they'll show through much better. So let's see what that looks like in practice. That looks okay. The windows are pretty much pure white. The whites are white. I'm gonna bring back some of those highlights in the wood, in the ceilings. So I'm just tweaking this. Let's try this right here, okay? I'm going to command click on that thumbnail to activate the selection as a mask. I'm going to turn on our RGB layers. Again, we don't need that for anything other than making the mask. All of these color channels are what we need to actually edit the image. go back to the layers palette, turn on that middle exposure, and I'm going to click this Add Layer Mask button. And you can see what's happened is I have applied the dark parts of that brighter exposure to the image. And some of this looks really great, and some of it looks pretty bad, right? So we've done a really good job sort of bringing some detail in that window. That looks significantly better to me. There's a lot more detail outside. We have much less blown out area up here and down here. A lot more detail. I turn that on and off. You can actually get the geometry of that skylight pretty well. But it's created a host of other problems, and it's sort of muddied the rest of the image. So I'm going to leave the good stuff, get rid of the lame stuff, sort of that muddiness. I'm just going to take a brush, and on the mask we just created, I'm just going to start painting out what I don't need with a big, soft brush. And that big, soft brush lets us cover our tracks very easily. So that all that we see is the work that we want. There. And I still think we've gone a little bit too far when you turn this on and off. So I can continue to, chisel at this with a brush. I'm going to try adjusting the opacity here to maybe 70%. And that feels really natural. That feels bright to me, but it doesn't feel like smoky or choked out. And then I'll just take this brush and continue my finessing here. Until I get this where I want it. And that's looking pretty good. Let's see how that looks. There's a little bit in here that I missed. I don't mind this. I lied. I don't mind this, the front of this pillar being a little bit darker, because the eye sort of gets caught on it when it's that bright. So I'm just going to blend that in. So now those bright areas have detail back, but they're still bright. And that looks a lot better to me. Okay, so we could keep going. And if I wanted to bring in some of these darkest darks, I think it won't look that great, but we'll try. I do like getting a little color in the sky, but it might start to be too bright. Whites in the sun should be like the brightest thing in the range of exposure here. So they should be almost blown out, and these are whites in direct sun. So if I want to see how bright those are, I'll go to Properties here, and I'm going to mouse over. And you can see it's 252, which is like a millimeter from being pure white. And that's pretty accurate, but let's just see how it looks if I go a little darker. I'll turn this on, and I'm gonna just use the brightest bits here. So I'll turn that layer on, do the same thing, Command or Control click on the RGB layer, add a mask, add a curves adjustment to this alpha 2 layer, and separate those brights from the rest of the image. I don't want the inside, just the outside. That looks like it will do it. Click OK. Command click to activate that selection. Go back to our layers channel, layers palette. I'm assuming this is going to look really goofy at first. Add layer mask, and yeah, it looks really goofy. And I'm going to put the opacity like at 20%, and I'm just kind of knocking it down little by little. Do I even need it? I like what it does with the sky. We get a little blue back, but I don't like what it's done up here. So I'm just going to sort of finesse that. with my brush. And I feel like we've lost that great highlight on the wall, so I'll get rid of that. Over there. And all we're doing is like really subtly taming the brightest parts out that window. And you can see it down here, like these shadows. And I will admit that this is maybe one step unnecessarily too far, but we do have detail back. It's like 20 pixels that we're dealing with, but we do get detail back way, way out there. And you can see it again down here. We get the shadows and the highlights. And we can tweak it a little bit with a mask. And I would say on the whole, that's looking pretty good exposure-wise. So I'm gonna go ahead and toss this darkest layer. I don't think we need it. And the next thing I wanna do is, I wanna clean up some of the, it's like a dirty white on this foreground wall. And I think what's happening is the sunlight is coming in and hitting the ceiling and bouncing around and hitting the whites. I'm gonna do the same thing I just did. I'm going to create a channel mask. And I'm gonna select the channel that, you know what? I'm just gonna do, so you can go channel by channel here, right? And the reds and the greens and the blues are all going to affect that image differently. And what I'm gonna do is, because yellow and red, there's a lot of yellow, a lot of red being bounced around by that ceiling. That red channel gives us the most white wall. And that's what I want. I want to make a hue and saturation adjustment that only affects that wall. So I'm gonna grab this red channel, I'm gonna duplicate it, I'm gonna add a curves adjustment to it, and I'm gonna try to make everything black except those white walls. That looks good because the yellow is predominantly distracting me in the highlights. And that's gonna be my mask. So I'm gonna I'm gonna command or control click on that channel thumbnail, turn my RGB channels back on, go back to layers, and instead of applying this as a mask to, you know, one of these image layers, I'm going to go to the new adjustment layer button, and I'm going to click on hue and saturation. And I'm going to grab the little handle here, and I'm just going to click anywhere on this wall where there's a bit of yellow pollution. And I don't want to go like, so it's easy to go really far, it looks goofy. I just want to pull out a little bit of those yellows. And you can see the difference that makes when I do this. We get a bit of a whiter wall. I might have gone too far. And so that's a very subtle adjustment to kind of rein in some of the yellow in the highlights that we see. Now, now the wood feels less yellow and more wood-like to me, especially right above our head and in the floor. And again, here is our mask. So that hue and saturation adjustment is only affecting the whiter parts of this image. So we can be done with that. Now let's say you want to brighten the whites in here a little bit. I can borrow this mask again, command click on that hue and saturation thumbnail, the layer mask thumbnail, add a curves adjustment. And I feel like maybe these walls could be a little bit brighter. So here's how I'm going to do that. And you can see I'm just making a few masks, borrowing them, doing multiple adjustments in the same places, and those walls brighten up nicely. And I can turn that on and off, and as you can see, we've got nice crisp whites. And like when you turn those adjustments off, you see the difference. It's subtle, but it definitely helps. And our walls become not pure white, they become white like we would expect them to be. There's a little bit of color because after all, we are in this wooden hallway. I would expect there to be some warmth, but I want them to be a little bit brighter and whiter than the camera registered them as. So that looks pretty good. Let's see if anything is really blown out here. I still see great detail here. Window. Nope. We're going to go to the properties window. And no, our whites are, I mean, it's almost blown out up here. It's almost blown out of here. All of the brightest parts of this image, as you'd expect them to be, are almost white. So our whites look good. The last thing I want to do here is add some contrast. This does feel a little bit flat because we are just using natural light. We're not using flash to really accentuate contrast here or bring out textures. So I'm going to add another curves adjustment. And I'm going to just try a preset here, medium contrast. And that feels like a bit much, so maybe we need to go with linear contrast, which is a very subtle. Oh yeah, I love that. Just a tiny bit of contrast to clean things up a little bit. And again, we are almost blown out where we need to be. And we're almost black where we need to be. So I'd say that's looking really good. And so really that was only like 3 adjustments just applied in different ways. Now the last thing I see before I finish this, there's a little bit of couch poking out here. I'm gonna go ahead and add a clone layer in here and just take 5 minutes to clean up some of the mess in this photo. All right, so that's looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and save this back to Lightroom, and we'll do some cropping and straightening there. And here in Lightroom, you can also take a second to see the difference of how we've edited this in Photoshop. And it's very subtle, but that's all that it needs to be. So we're almost done. First thing I'm gonna do is make sure everything's nice and straight. Use our guided transformation tool. And that's looking good. And we're gonna give it a little crop. I don't think we need so much of the right-hand side, or even the left-hand side for that matter. And I'm wondering if I want to keep this centered, or if I want to come up a little bit. Let's try like right through that couch there. And I could be convinced that a vignette, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to go vignette. I'm going to do a little fake vignette here. So it's just not so bright in the foreground with a gradient graduated neutral density filter on the right to sort of tame some of that brightness there. And just keep the eye moving through the picture. And there is our finished image. Let's go back on location and get the next one.